Welcome to the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. I am your host, Alex Green, and I'm on a mission to bring the power of embodiment to people all around the world. In this podcast, we explore how embodiment practices, trauma healing, and knowledge about the human nervous system can help us find our ground, discover new sources of meaning, and create connection in an ever-changing world. The deepest change is embodied change. All right. Well, I am very excited to be sitting down this afternoon with Dr. Cathleen King. And Kathleen is in southern Utah, where her home is. I'm in Boulder, Colorado, as per usual. And we're going to be talking about her very powerful learning platform and community for stress and trauma and regulation called Primal Trust. And that's what we're going to be talking about. Dr. Kat, sometimes goes by that name, is a physical therapist by training, but has studied the nervous system and the body in an extraordinarily comprehensive manner. I think large in part from her own healing journey, which we might get to hear a little bit about, but everything from the science of the physiology of stress and trauma and tools that help affect regulation, from breath work to somatic work to brain retraining in traditional Eastern and indigenous practices, you name it. If from functional medicine, if it has a tangible influence on the nervous system, Dr. Kat has utilized it and likely incorporated it into this super comprehensive program called Primal Trust. And I'll just share just really briefly my own connection to you, Kathleen, and why it's been so enriching and exciting in these last months. One of the first podcast interviews I did earlier this year was with our mutual friend and colleague, Dr. Eric Robbins, who's a TRE urologist in Southern California, and also a TRE practitioner. That's how I know him. And he told me after we did this interview, he said, you need to meet Dr. Kat. She has put together the most comprehensive bottom up and top down. I hope, and by the way, listeners, I hope we get to define that in a little bit later here in this conversation, but has put together the most comprehensive bottom up and top down approach to stress and trauma and chronic illness healing that he had seen. And that began connection with you. I went through the Primal Trust program, level 1, over these months to understand it myself. I'll talk more about some things that I learned as I went through that program. But that's just a brief introduction. Kathleen, thanks so much for taking time to have a conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me, Alex.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I always like to start with kind of like an origin story. What are the forces and what led you to end up doing this with your life? I would love to know.
Being unable to be healed by the medical system led me to this. Being unable to figure out what was wrong with me. Many hours of wanting to control everything in my body led me to this. And eventually realizing that the nervous system and the brain run the show of our physiology. And that if I wanted to shift the state of my health, I needed to affect ground zero, and no pill was going to really do that for me, at least long term. No doctor could really teach me how to trust life and trust anything, and that I needed to learn how to repair a nervous system that had some issues since I was born. And that's the short of it. So it was learning how to repair my nervous system.
Yeah. What and if you're comfortable, we might hear a little bit more about that process for you. But I'm curious if even some of your own health and nervous system history, did that lead you into PT to some extent?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was always interested in the body. I had a knee injury in high school. I was a basketball player, and the it was devastating to me at the time. And I remember the physical therapist she was like an emotional coach for me in a time where I was going through a lot personally,
Mm,
and linked the body to my life. And I thought, this is so cool, like this body mind approach, even for just a simple knee injury. Made a huge impact on me, and I was like, I want to be able to have that mix of being a counselor, teacher, body awareness practitioner.
right.
uh, so that's what I got into, and I got into working primarily with chronic pain and complex issues because I loved the mind body connection from the beginning, and that's how and why I became a physical therapist.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Well, so just in broad terms for the listeners who are just hearing Primal Trust and that you've got this program, let's just could you just introduce in brief terms what is the program and who is it for?
Yeah. So Primal Trust is a program for people who are struggling with chronic illness, anxiety, mental health states, trauma. They've probably been to many doctors and they are having a hard time getting their life back, their vitality back. And it's a program to help you learn how to consciously self regulate your own biology. Consciously regulate your own biology, and that it's possible to do that. And so we take people through a series of practices ranging from brain retraining to body based practices, breathing practices, and help people learn how to consciously shift their emotional state and also their biochemical state so their body's self healing can be engaged.
Yeah, very cool. One of the things that I've been impressed by, this wasn't news to me, but it became even clearer going through your material, as a somatic experiencing person myself, and I also believe that the physiology is kind of a ground zero place to work for a number of things, stress related, and chronic illness, chronic disease. So that's kind of already part of my paradigm. But what was so clear through your educational materials and program is just really the diversity of things, symptoms and syndromes that have in common that the autonomic nervous system, the limbic system, is not in its optimal regulated state, and things like Lyme disease, chronic fatigue, myalgic encephalomyelitis, or however you say that, mold sensitivities, autonomic dysfunction like POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia. What else? Of course, long COVID, autoimmune diseases, chronic pain, probably compartment syndrome. Kind of any kind of thing that we would think of. Um, uh, on the one hand, they manifest quite differently, but really the premise of your work is that a slow, steady process of learning the principles of one's own physiology and the levers and controls, both from mindset and other things, that can over time build up to very, very tangible changes at the physiological level. So anyway, that's just kind of part of my excitement, was just seeing the breadth of maladies, of that can be served through this approach.
Mhm. It's amazing that in the Western medical system, these diagnoses all go to various different practitioners.
Right.
But at the underlying cause, our nervous system is driving the show. And that there isn't a common practitioner of helping people with their nervous system and their brain and their response to life and all the things that end up causing inflammation, which causes all sorts of things from there.
Mm. Mm. Prior to going through your material through some of my clients. I work with chronic fatigue. I've worked with Lyme, mold, long COVID, stress trauma, all that sort of thing. And I had a number of folks along the way who had done what I think of as somewhat similar, but not the same kinds of programs as Primal Trust, DNRS being one, Gupta being the other. I don't know a lot about them. I only knew enough to conclude that there was some value, but there were some things that were not being fully addressed, at least with those few folks that I had worked with. And not in the spirit of bad mouthing other programs or anything, but I'm curious, just if you could compare and contrast a little bit, or locate Primal Trust within, as in comparison to some of these other, programs as well.
Sure. Gupta and DNRS are wonderful programs when it comes to limbic system retraining and brain retraining. And that's primarily what they were designed to do, is a brain retraining program. And truly some of the best pioneers. I mean, I learned a lot about what I do because of these programs. So I give them so much credit. They've helped thousands. And brain retraining is a great tool. But I found for me, especially because of trauma, I needed a lot more than just brain retraining. I needed to learn how to target my vagus nerve. I needed to learn how to somatically move and somatically presence my body. I wanted to also add in things like functional neurology and parts work and attachment repair. So those other two programs are awesome, but they're typically brain retraining, which is a top-down program. Gupta has a little bit of parts work as well. And Primal Trust, I added quite a bit more in to make it a bit more holistic. Because that's just the way.
You couldn't help yourself. No, yeah.
I was like, it's a great piece of the pie, and it really is. And for some people, it's all they need, and for some people, it's a great start. So
yeah.
I don't want to say anything negative, because they have paved the way for many people to understand the importance of limbic system work and how it relates to chronic illness.
Great. I promised in the introduction that we would define things a little bit as we go, concepts, and that distinction of a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach. Well, just explain that a little bit to somebody who hadn't heard that before.
Very simply, top down, you're thinking top is your brain, down is your body. It's an approach where we're using our brain and our mindfulness to communicate to our body. Bottom up approach is focusing our attention more on the body and presencing what's going on in the body to influence what's happening back up to the top in the brain. So it's really a feedback loop. Top down, bottom up.
Right.
And to influence our entire physiology by targeting both aspects. And there are a lot of practitioners that are more focused on one versus the other.
Right.
I like doing a little bit of both.
Yeah. And that is part of what really resonated with me. For that same reason, I've gotten so much benefit from coming at things from both directions, and back and forth. I wonder if we could back up a little bit to, if you can veto this topic, but you reference your own personal story that you needed a lot of support. I don't think we need to know about the trauma necessarily, but perhaps you would be willing to share just some of the symptoms that you struggled with, and what kind of a duration of time took you into much improved health and well-being.
Sure. My journey with illness started literally 20 years ago this fall, with what looked like dizziness, couldn't sit up. I was traveling, I got sick, I got parasite infections, but then my whole body went wacko, which now I know is POTS or dysautonomia. And then I was never the same. My digestion was never the same. I had anxiety, insomnia. Granted, I had a nice little history of chronic complex PTSD that I didn't really know about at the time. But
right. You didn't fully appreciate. Yeah.
As far as illness, it started with, a parasite infection that didn't seem to go away, that I ended up having all sorts of a host of weird things that went on for many years. And I went from doctor to doctor, and they gave me anxiety pills and stomach acid pills and all those things. And then eventually I got into the naturopath route, and they're like, oh, it's chronic viral infection. No, it's Lyme disease. No, it's mold toxicity. No, you've got, all these, it's your genes. You've got these detox things. Nope, it's the heavy metals. I
Mhm.
could go on and on and on.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
symptoms got to the point where I couldn't work anymore.
Mm.
It was very sensitive to light and sound. I had a lot of neurological stuff. I was in bed. I was exhausted. If I took a shower, I
Mhm.
needed to lay in bed for a couple days. I had a very small bucket of energy.
Mm.
I was highly sensitive to everything. I couldn't handle treatments. I couldn't handle any of the things they were trying to do. It just would blow me to pieces. And I
Mm.
felt like this hypersensitive, what is wrong with me, doctor to doctor,
Mm.
hopeless. And I had two small children, and I felt
Mm.
it was a really hard journey because I couldn't show up. And then the self-hate piled up, and then that
Mm.
made everything worse.
Mm.
And yeah, I just was losing my function mentally, physically, spiritually,
Yeah.
emotionally. It was a
Mm.
long journey, and I spent about 10 years really in the thick of it, where I couldn't work. I was just like, I'd get out of bed for a while and start to do well for a few weeks and then crash again. And that went on for many years
Mm.
until I found the approach of focusing on the brain and nervous system.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you did find that. Yeah, I'm curious when things began to turn a corner I'm curious what you consider the beginning of what ended up being a healing process.
The beginning was realizing that nothing I was doing was working. And it was sort of one of those moments of like giving up on the treatments and feeling completely out of control and helpless.
Mm.
And remembering that when I worked with chronic pain, that the brain regulated a lot of that. And I thought, I wonder how much the brain has to do with my chronic infection and chronic mold and blah, blah, blah. And I started doing a little bit of research. And sure enough, I was like, oh, wow, people are doing this approach that I already knew. And
Hmm.
so I let go of treatment and detoxing and the pills and the doctors. And I started to focus on um, my limbic system and brain. I started with functional neurology first because I knew those skills from being a physical therapist of how the
Mm.
eyes and coordinating the eyes affects the brain.
Mm.
And I
Mhm.
started with some simple brain retraining and breath work. And I started having my function come back. And I was like,
And
what?
were you just sort of reading things and then applying it to yourself, or did somebody help you, or?
I went to a functional neurologist that I knew
Yeah.
to just give me his opinion of what exercises I should be doing.
Mhm.
Read a lot about limbic system retraining, and then I started learning from both DNRS, the lightning process. I was trained in Psych K as well, so I kind of mixed a few of those things together and
Mhm.
started playing with that, and then some breath work, the Buteyko method at the time because I had severe panic disorder,
Sure.
and that combo changed things. And I was like, okay, this now makes sense. Like, of course, the immune system is affected by our stress, our ability to detox. And it was like, ding, 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 light bulb went off after 10 years of why can't I take this pill? Why can't I do this treatment? Why do I have this, all these bugs? Why do I have more and more and more diagnosis year after year? Uh,
Right.
so, yeah, that was the turnaround.
Got it. Very cool. Um, Well, something that I appreciated so much about the several months that it took me to go through the level one regulate material. I think there's about 7 modules where all through video and with exercises, yeah, videos and worksheets and things like that. And the, I really appreciate sort of just the flow of the material. You sort of the beginning, sort of some psychoeducation and explaining things. A lot of your own personal story was included, and I wonder, I guess maybe we'll do it without giving away every detail because that'd be hard to do in an hour. Um, but could we talk about that journey, the journey of the regulate, and kind of yeah, just to sort of hear about some of what adds up to the program.
What I think makes Regulate unique in comparison to other programs is exactly that. There's a flow.
Mm,
Flow to me, I had created a lot of content before that, tried a lot of things out, saw what worked, saw what flared people, and eventually I just dropped in. I said, what is the optimal flow of what people need to learn to get on board with this whole nervous system thing?
mm,
What do they need to learn so that they don't blow their nervous system out early on? So they don't reject the whole thing and throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because that's what I saw in this community. People would come in, they
yep,
would pick up some tool and it was too much, or they didn't have enough conviction about why. And they
yep,
said, nope, that doesn't work for me. And they'd end up right back looking for treatment again.
yep.
Well, I was trying to find a way to carefully convince the mind that this path is worthwhile going on, and convince the body that I'm not going to blow you to pieces in the process and not make you do things that you resent right away. Because brain retraining can really trigger the heck out of people.
Totally. Right. Right. Okay. No, the logic of that really I love that. It's sort of like getting the buy-in, getting enough understanding, and as you say, something that makes it worth some enough context to understand what might come up along the way, why, and enough guidance around, yeah, not doing too much too fast, especially in those early stages. That all came through just really beautifully in that first section.
One of the complaints we get sometimes is like, there's too much basics and you're making me pace and I don't want to do that. And I know all this already. And I always say to people, you know what? I know it too. And I needed to pace myself and I needed to remind my brain of the basics. Because if you're just coming in, give me the tool. There's a part of you that's driving the show that's actually driven by that limbic response. It's you're rushing, and that's part of what you don't want to do. You want to
Hmm.
slow down. You want to digest what this journey actually means and what it's asking of you, and carefully start targeting the nervous system. And
Hmm.
so, as much as people get frustrated with the approach, I found that it's exactly that. It has caused the outcomes of Regulate to be phenomenal based on
Hmm.
our research and our data that we're gathering.
Hmm.
Because it's more than just a tool, it's a process of learning and rewiring your approach to life.
Yeah. Well, so in that early phase, some of the this what I guess psychoeducation, or just education, physiological education. Let's just touch on a couple of the things that you cover. From the cell danger response, and just basic principles of the nervous system, into the polyvagal theory. Yeah, we can't cover all of that right now, but could you just give like just a mini, like, I sort of like, what are like the things that people need to know in order to have a window into understanding themselves?
Well, first, I'd say that if you like to geek out on physiology, look up the research by Robert Navio on the cell danger response, because
Mm,
that to me is the bread and butter of why this process works like it does. At the end of the day, our cells are stuck in a danger response when we have chronic illness. And we need to find a way to convince the cells that they're safe, not just our psyche, but literally our cells. That's
mm,
what's going on. Our cells start to harden. They start to go into protection mode. They stop detoxifying. Our immune system gets regulated. We get depleted of nutrients and we start storing up toxins.
mm,
Well, that can make you sick. The cell starts replicating in a way that just isn't going to lead to health if it's an ongoing cell danger response.
mm,
Danger response is normal. It's normal when we come in contact with a pathogen. We have a physical, emotional, chemical stressor to our system. Our
sure.
cells are brilliant. They say, "Hey, everybody, there's some danger right now. Let's cover up and hide. Let's block out the virus or the pathogen or the toxin or whatever."
Mm,
But for some people, their cells don't get the signal that it's time to come out of protection. The war is over. They stay in that stress state. And
mm,
typically it's people who have had a history of stress and trauma,
mm,
because the physiology is used to being in a stress state. And so cell danger response is normal, but it's abnormal when it's ongoing. And targeting the limbic system, the nervous system, the vagus nerve, that all helps your cells to get signals of safety, to tell the mitochondria we can use our energy to thrive rather than protect. And once that happens, your body has an innate intelligence to fight infection. It knows how to detoxify, it knows how to digest,
Mm,
and that can all come back online.
mm.
So that's my nutshell cell danger response.
Yeah. I love that. And so, and can we, you're mentioning the limbic system as having a role in creating the continuous, chronic cell danger response. Just give us just a little bit of how that there's the term limbic system overactivation. How does that get set up, and what does that look like from a brain perspective?
So the limbic system, if it's getting chronic messages that there is a threat, whether it's internal or external. Internally, if your cells are sending signals of threat intracellularly, that's going to also hit the limbic system. If it's sensing toxins and pathogens and chemicals because you're not detoxifying fully and it's just kind of floating around in the system, that's
Hmm.
the limbic system. If you're emotionally, and maybe even more than anything, emotionally stressed out because you feel like crap,
Right.
that hits the limbic system. The limbic system is like, oh, we're not safe. And it sends messages to the hypothalamus, which produces all of these chemicals in your body, like sends signals for cortisol and
Yeah.
adrenaline and all sorts of
Stress
stuff.
chemistry. Yeah. Or what do you dose chemistry, as I learned from you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can chemistry is the stress chemistry, and dose
Oh,
chemistry is the calming chemistry.
okay.
So it's going to send out can chemistry, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine,
Yep.
and that is going to send a cascade of effects through the body of staying in protection. And so
Mm,
the good thing is that we can manually, consciously target the limbic system.
mm,
We can target that part of our brain, the fight or flight response, through our emotions, through what we visualize, what we say to ourselves, our body posture, our breath, our tone of voice,
mm.
all of those things. Our brain is listening all the time. And so we target the limbic system to help switch out of cell danger response. It's one of the ways we target the cell danger response is through that limbic system, communication with our conscious mind. And yeah, that's what limbic system retraining is, I would say.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, and in my view, so I'll tell you another little, epiphany for me in my little journey, going through the material was, it was like I then understood, and maybe you had already referenced or defined it, but I then grasped sort of the concept of the name primal trust, and just this evoking that, in a way, that's kind of the opposite of a chronically danger response or fear state in the limbic system. The opposite is sort of a deep trust in that actually our physiology can be incredible, and maybe even more than our physiology, maybe us as humans can be supportive of wellness. And you do such a good job contrasting that, and indicating that a key ingredient as people go through the program is to be leaning into this concept of primal trust. And so I just wonder if you could sort of speak to that a little bit right now.
So the name of my company, Primal Trust, is the antidote to all of this. In my opinion, I was like, what is the remedy?
Mm,
Well, remedy is that if we are in a state of unease and stress and fear, we are missing trust. And what do we need to trust in? We need to trust in life itself. We need to trust in the innate intelligence of the body. We need to trust that there's something greater that understands this complex physiology.
mm,
So it's not doctor trust. It's not, pill trust. It is primal trust. It's primal trust. It's our innate connection to life itself that is
mm,
there in every human body.
mm,
That when we can come into a state of safety and connection with our bodies, with our loved ones, with life itself, this frequency that
Mm.
I call Primal Trust is restored and sends signals to every cell of your body that the war is over and we can return back into production of energy and detoxification, etc.
Lovely. Very lovely. Um, Very cool. So can we talk about some of the practices that start to develop? And I kind of have an outline, but I don't remember the exact sequence. But in my view, after kind of getting that basic foundation, now we start to go into some practices and so I yoga coming from functional neurology being one, some breath work, and in one thing I'm recollecting is how how minimally, in a way, minimally that begins. This sort of start something, that's setting a ball in motion. That you give a lot of emphasis around pacing and being patient. Can you speak to that sort of early phase of beginning some of the practical exercises?
Well, the first thing to know is that the brain doesn't like to change, and our nervous system doesn't really like to change. It's threatening, even if we're changing into safety. And so, what I found with after working with thousands of people, that if I didn't work on that change slowly, there would be a rubber band effect. And so, we start change very incrementally. We target the vagus nerve to begin with, primarily, and we're
Hmm.
doing it in such a subtle way that it's like little teases of safety, and then you can get back into your life. Little
Right.
teases of safety so that the body starts to trust this process, and that the inner psyche starts to trust that we're not going to put them into vulnerability, because safety is seen as vulnerable after a while in your
Hmm.
psyche,
Right.
into parts of you. So we have to carefully sneak in the safety.
Mm.
And that's what can frustrate people at first. I'm like, these are exercises are so little, but I remember when I first started doing the functional neurology work myself, I went for it. Oh my gosh, the rubber band effect of insomnia and anxiety was wild. And
Mm.
I I tried to do too much too soon, which is just like me. And so I have learned slow and steady wins
Mm.
the race with the
Mm.
limbic system, the nervous system.
Mm.
And even before the exercises, we introduced polyvagal theory, which you asked about. And
Right.
that's really the understanding of the state of our physiology.
Mm.
Are we in a fight state, a flight state, freeze,
Mm.
shut down? Because knowing what's happening inside of you helps you to know what kind of tools would be helpful for you, what you need to be doing. And so, really, it's about becoming consciously aware of what your nervous system state is, and then carefully adding in the tools that make sense for you at the time.
Hmm.
Tools are going to change over time, and the repetitions and all of that are going to change over time
Right.
as you build more self
Yep.
trust in the process.
Yeah, very cool. Well, let's why don't you give just a little bit of an example of some of these early techniques? Um, maybe you'll do a better job than I will. Can you pick one or two? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm thinking I work, but you may want to. Could we just maybe we'll even try one of them together, just as an example of the kinds of early phase but potent
Sure.
exercises that you bring in. Yeah.
So we always start with orienting. Orienting is the way that we land into the present moment and show our brain, oh, I'm right here in this chair. I'm not running from a tiger at age 15 right now, or I'm not in the future where everything collapses. I'm sitting here in this chair. So the
Mm.
first thing is coming into the present moment and noticing what's first in your outer environment. That's usually easier for people. And I like to have people just slowly notice their bottom on the chair. And while they're doing that, look around the room until you find something that catches your eye that you've not noticed before. Or maybe it's something normal that you want to see with new eyes, like you've never been in planet Earth before, and you've never seen a doorknob before, and it's this planet. Like, what is that for? Want to focus on that, and just letting your brain focus on something in the present moment that's stationary,
Mm.
that's non-threatening, that's in your environment that maybe you even find beautiful, or unique. And so I'm looking at a doorknob and I'm looking at the shine of the metal. And now while you're staring at that doorknob, keep your eyes fixed on the doorknob and slowly rotate your head in the no back and forth position as if you're shaking your head very slowly no, while keeping your eyes focused on that object. And this is a little bit of functional neurology or eye gaze stabilization, working on the vestibular ocular motor reflex. What this does is when you're able to hold your eyes in a steady position while moving your vestibular system, it sends messages of safety to the limbic system. Because when we're stressed, our eyes are darting around and we cannot focus. But if you're actually able to focus and move your head and your breath is still, you're literally telling the brain, I'm in a safe space right now because I can focus and I can move my head safely at the same time. So that's one of the beginning biohacks. And that seems so silly and simple, but doing 5 to 10 repetitions, some people may even have a response from that, a little dizziness, a little funniness. That's just the brain kicking up. Like, wait a minute, I'm not used to being still. I'm not used to focusing. That's an indicator that that's a great exercise for you to start with. So 5 to 10 repetitions a few times a day. If it's even hard, 2 to 3 repetitions once a day. I started with 5 repetitions once a day for a week. And I was able to actually start driving again because my eyes were focused from doing functional neurology.
Right.
So that exercise right there, Alex, I still do that all the time when I'm stressed, when I feel fragmented, spaced out, been on the computer, got some bad news, whatever. Orient, find something in my room that I connect with, find beauty with, and then just gently moving my neck side to side and just sending that signal to the brain that I'm safe enough to eye gaze and move my head at the same time.
Wonderful. Yeah. I love being guided in those things because so that I orienting and in somatic experiencing, that's a very foundational thing. And I love your language around you know, uh, finding as though it's the first time you've been on Earth. And anyway, it's fun to be on the receiving end of being guided. So very nice. Um, you've mentioned the vagus nerve a lot, and I think a lot of people hear about it more so than 10 years ago. It's getting at least some more awareness. It's part of what's being discussed in the polyvagal theory is, what branch of the parasympathetic nervous system is dominant, whether that's the sympathetic nervous system, whether it's the freeze physiology in the dorsal vagal circuitry or the social engagement nervous system, the ventral vagal circuitry. So that's kind of the, on the more technical side of it. But I think at a popular level, we're hearing a lot about it. And there's so many things that influence, like singing, gargling, vocal prosody. There's almost one thing I'm so interested in when it comes to vagal toning, or the concept of improving the vagal tone, is how many different pathways there are to potentially influence, strengthen, or improve that part of our physiology. Could we just talk? Could we kind of survey, like, because just so that listeners can hear kind of, the many different things that can have an influence on vagal tone.
Well, it's a nerve that has so many different ways that it gives feedback to both the brain and the body. And because of that, it wanders through all different parts of our organs. It's affected by our voice. It's affected by even getting sunlight. It's affected by temperature. It's affected by our breath. It's affected by our eyes. So, I'd say the first thing is just Google, how do I tone my vagus nerve? You're going to get a whole bunch of ideas there. Like, it's all over the place. But the things that I find target it the most is our voice and our breath. Because of just where the vocal cords and the vagus nerve run through, right through the chest and the throat. And so the vagus nerve is one of the best ways to start teaching your physiology to come back into harmony, into homeostasis if you're someone who's chronically stressed,
Right.
or someone who's chronically tired where you're just so shut down. It's also strengthening your vagus nerve to start giving a little bit more feedback to the body that it's okay to start moving and producing energy again. And so, it's like the most important muscle of the body. If there was a nerve that was a muscle,
Mm-hmm.
vagus
Mm-hmm.
nerve, the
Yeah.
one you don't want to let go flabby.
Yep.
And, even just simply making eye contact and talking like you're interested with the person you're talking with voice intonation is such a great way just in your relationship to
Mm.
improve your vagus tone and improve your relationship, because they're going to take in that information that they matter to you. And then they start getting into heart brain coherence and their vagus nerve tone improves. And I
Right.
notice, like for me, when I take literally 1 minute and I connect with my child that way, makes so much difference. You're targeting your own vagus nerve, you're targeting theirs, and then they learn how to replicate that in their day.
Yeah.
So,
I'm smiling because I was just thinking the same thing. I have a 1.5-year-old daughter, and I think and the sneaky way I get, besides the many ways I get co-regulation with her, but through reading, right, or reading, or just the way that I speak to, she's just learning to talk right now, and if I talk like I'm giving a science lecture, that's not a way to communicate with a baby. And so I sometimes I think to myself, oh, I'm getting all this good vagal
mhm.
toning with my, all this prosodic conversation with my daughter. But so I love that the use of voice and breath as a gateway.
Yeah. And, as far as breath, it can just be as simple as a 5-second inhale and a 5-second exhale and focusing on the heart. And you can do all the other fancy breath patterns you want. You can
Hmm.
Google just being aware of your breath, and just even having a nice or a voo
Yeah.
or an om or whatever that's going to make some sound. So doing that consciously while you're orienting to the room, while you're staring at the doorknob on the wall that we just were talking about, like all these things together kind of add
Hmm.
up.
Yeah.
And you'll be surprised at how much more relaxed you feel just after doing that for 5 or 6 breaths.
Right. Well, and so for those listening, so Kathleen is saying, Google this, Google that. Yeah, yeah, you could Google this or that. Or but just so you know, if you do the Primal Trust program, every single thing you can imagine, if you've heard of a breath practice, there's a video of Kathleen leading you through that. If there's an eye movement thing, it's in there. If there's a belly rolling, if there Rosenberg's neck vagal exercises, booing, sighing, Tibetan breath practices, it is all there. So if you want one-stop shopping, in my view, for these things, then there is one place you can get it all.
Yeah, you find it all inside.
One, just as a quick aside, I like how you had included the physiological side, which I heard about through Dr. Andrew Huberman, and it only came on my radar. I don't know when that term came or when his lab did that study or whatever, but it was so validating for me because for a long time, 10 years or something, my own, as I work with people, especially in SE, 99% of the time, my first homework lesson, often in the first session, is I say, if you have lost your ability to authentically sigh, then that's stage number one, is when you're driving in your car or something like that, is to reclaim the ability to have just sort of like a satisfying sigh. And so Huberman's research just, show that, yeah, there's a lot of breath practices and they all have influenced the autonomic nervous system, but that, and he defines it as the one breath, the nasal breath with a little bit extra inhalation to really open up the lungs, and then a sighing release is one of the fastest breath practices to catch the autonomic system. So anyway, it's just one that I've so simple. In fact, we do it instinctively unless we've somehow gotten out of the habit or trained ourselves not to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, percent. It's amazing how simple All of these things you can teach them to little children. In fact, most children do these things naturally that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And they impact chronic illness like Lyme disease, long COVID, all these things.
Right.
Like what?
Right. I think, yeah, that's the point right there. That's the wow, and that's the magic, is these things, they're so simple. They're not shots, they're not pills, they're not length, but they add up to meaningful healing. Yep. Yep. Let's continue down the regulate journey just a little bit. So there, after vagal work, there, in my memory, there's somatic movement, there's somatic presencing, cultivating interoceptive awareness. There's the what you call the ABC dimensional shift. Can you just, we won't cover everything in our conversation, but can you just sort of indicate how a few of those start to make a difference?
Yeah. So after we do a little bit of targeting of the vagus nerve and start playing a little bit with the bottom up approach,
Mm-hmm.
I move us into a top down approach with brain retraining next.
Mm.
And that's simply to start teaching people that they have the ability to be the strongest voice in their mind, and that the limbic system will respond to that, so that if they do get flooded and overwhelmed, they can use their mind as a tool to let the limbic system know you're safe. Because sometimes when we start getting into the body, into parts work, especially, or trauma,
Mm-hmm.
you might hit something that will flood you. And you need to be able to resource yourself to tell the limbic system, hey, we're okay right now. We can come out of that response.
Mm.
I know for me, I was not able to do that for many years when I was doing certain therapies like EMDR and certain somatic stuff. For me,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a strong enough access point in my limbic system
Mm-hmm.
to stop the flooding when it happened. And so I weave in brain retraining, which is that limbic system piece where we use creative visualization as our primarily tool there,
Yep.
and a little bit of mindful understanding of how the brain works, so that you
Yep.
understand that what you're thinking is mostly a memory structure activation.
Yep. And the pattern interrupt concept is part of that.
Yep. Interrupting what you're habitually thinking, ruminating, and projecting in your mind. Like, oh, I'm doing that whole thing again to protect myself. We have a habit of trying to protect and fix and all of that. And you're trying to break these old habits. And the brain is just a rehearsal machine. It's just a rehearsal machine. And your consciousness can retrain that machine. And that's so important. You can retrain it through repetition. And so we start working on that top-down piece. And then we move into some somatics, where now that we have some tools under our belt, some vagus toning, some brain, the ability to target the limbic system, we start getting into where the real work is, which is in the body. And I ultimately think that somatics and experiencing is where the real work is. It's where we meet ourselves. And I think that when we miss that piece, we are missing out on our full healing, which is my one thing I'd say against brain retraining alone. I think somatics is essential for every human being on this planet. But we need to be able to go in there and be resourced if we're on our own. Now, I think if you have a great somatic therapist, you can maybe skip some of these things and go right into it because you're being held
as a container.
A lot of my people are on their own. And so we go into somatics and we learn how to feel the feels that we were never able to feel. And we learn how to move the energy through the body that's stuck and stagnant and causing inflammatory responses and all sorts of things. And then we really learn how to meet these beautiful parts of ourselves that makes me cry. I mean, that we lost a long time ago. And it's such a beautiful, rich journey. And we learn how to get in touch with the magic of our aliveness, like literally this primordial essence that sometimes we can come in contact with, that is our God moments in our own body. And they can be incredibly healing and spiritual and deep. And there's often a lot of feelings in there and a lot of sensations and a lot of symptoms that pop up. Right. And so the journey is learning how to hold space for all of that so that it can move through. that is the healing. It's not the Lyme disease, the chronic fatigue, the mold, the da, 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 da. It is the energy and the emotion and the frequencies in the body that need to be felt and moved and befriended and united. And that's the part I love the most.
Oh, wow. I've got chills and I've got the feels. Yeah, I feel the feels. Yeah, there's all that richness. Meeting yourself. I love that. What so I guess I've got a curiosity, which is, everyone's different, because what, everybody's flavor of not optimal regulation and whatnot is different, and with different time frames and all of that. But I wonder if there are any common rules of thumb around um, the timeline of things like the brain retraining, things like, I think a lot of people, people ask me that all the time, and I actually don't, when they come in for somatic experiencing, I often don't, I don't have the best answers. You have a much, partly because of your program and how long you've been doing this, you've got a much bigger sample size than me working one-on-one with people. So, so I'm just curious, like, what do you say when people want to know how long before I start to notice a difference? How will I know when I'm ready to move into another phase of healing? That sort of thing.
My own personal journey was the first 4 months were pretty rocky of doing this work.
Yeah.
At the 4 month mark, something shifted for me.
Mm.
And at the 6 month mark, something really shifted for me. So I usually tell people 4 to 6 months to begin with. In Regulate, we have our data that we collect after 2 to 4 months, and our gains are pretty significant. Like, for example, chronic Lyme disease, they usually have the average was about a 50% gain of function after 2 to 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
So, gain of function, meaning they came in at 50% of their function and they got a 50% gain after 2 to 4 months. After 6 months, the number jumps way up. There's something about 6 months, and a lot of the research outside of my program that I've heard about with neuroplasticity says 6 months of neuroplastic work makes a huge change in the brain. So at the very least, I give 4 to 6 months of your best efforts. And that's why I encourage people to go through Regulate a little more slowly. If you can take 4 months to go through it instead of quickly 2 months, I think it's going to be even better. 6 months, even better than that. So that 4 to 6 month mark is a nice magic number. And then, from there, I'd say that next 6 months, you're starting to work on those deeper layers. And, I see a lot of change, a lot of profound change in that 6 to 9 month, 6 to 12 month mark. So that's the general idea of stats. You might even notice a difference right away. I mean, sometimes when you just take a breath and you're here, your body is like, "Woo, she's back," and there's a huge shift.
Yeah.
So, I mean, many people will tell me after 2 months, "Wow, I'm done. I'm good." I mean, I have really quick turnarounds, and I have some that have been there in a year, and they're just like, I'm making gains. I'm still working on it, and I'm still
Yep.
going to keep working on it.
Yep. Yep. Well, so the other thing that well, I'm thinking two thoughts at once, but they're related. And one of the impacts for me when I went through this program, when I heard about it from Dr. Robbins, met you, thought this looks really good, and I wanted to see it. And the reason it was exciting for me personally, with the work I do and that my team does, is I thought to myself, okay, great. This is a container that I can sort of unhesitatingly recommend for the many clients that we work with, who they get a lot of benefit from our one-on-one work, no question about it. But this idea of potentially being held in a different kind of a container for self-paced work, but also a community element. The idea of, because I can't tell you how many people I have worked with where so much of, and I'm guessing this might be similar for you, where the initial phase of my work with them is for them to understand that they're not alone. This is a thing. What's true, like that there's others like that. And I'm always sad when people have been really struggling with autonomic dysregulation of some sort. In a very perplexing way, they feel misunderstood by the medical context often. They often feel misunderstood by their family and peers. And so something that really I thought when I encountered this was, wow, this is a place where people can do their own healing work in an awesome way and connect in community with others. And can you just speak a little bit about how that works for people going through the program?
When people are on this chronic illness path, it's one of the most isolating, lonely things because you lose your ability to get out and about.
Hmm.
And then you feel like you're the only one like this. And then you feel crazy because people, your doctors don't understand you, and you feel like, what's wrong with me? And there's something that I know for me, when I finally started to make friends, I made some friends in doing brain retraining, and we
Hmm.
would talk about our situation. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone.
Hmm.
And when I'd watch certain friends start to heal ahead of me,
Hmm.
it was like, oh my gosh, it's possible because they're like me and they're healing. And there's something about that mirror neuron effect that gives you more belief in you. And community is essential for healing chronic illness.
Hmm.
I really think it's very difficult to do on your own. It's
Hmm.
almost like you need to, your belief system needs to see others ahead of you, like cheering you on.
Hmm.
You're in this exchange happening where you're sharing with them, they're sharing with you. There's an energy that's finally getting exchanged in your life.
Hmm.
It's so beautiful. In our community, now that we've been at this now for a few years, it's just growing, and we've got wise mentors other than me helping me out, cheering on the newbies. And
Hmm.
it's so beautiful because it becomes a movement, and it becomes a collective frequency of what's possible, and that just creates more and more ripple effect in the world. And it's been the most beautiful thing and surprising thing to unfold, to watch all of this become a worldwide community.
And so because all I did was the video courses, which was a great container in and of itself. Um, the way it seems like there's live classes that people can join in. There might be study groups. There's you can work with a mentor in sort of a cohort. Can you just speak to that a little bit? Because yeah.
We try to give a lot of different ways where people can be involved at various comfort levels. So
Hmm.
you can have your own little peer group and study the material together on your own. That's been really successful. You can come to live classes almost every single day, sometimes
Hmm.
multiple times a day, and join in with me and others, and ask questions and talk about what's going on. We have yes, we have like little journey groups where you can work also in a cohort, but with a mentor who's
Hmm.
guiding you.
Hmm.
And we have, all sorts of fun classes like let's get together and just elevate our mood. We have grief circles. Let's get together and hold space for each other. We have, juicy classes where we can learn. We have journaling classes. We have, dance. There's all different types of things that, I think are beneficial for people. But ultimately that they have a place where they can belong, even if they're dealing with chronic illness, and that they can connect and they're not alone in the world. And almost every single day, you can find some source of regulation through Primal Trust.
And sort of a similar question, because I went through level 1 regulate, and I see that there's, I think, levels 2 and 3 or different ongoing work. Yeah, what continues as you those who choose to do those phases? What starts to happen there?
I actually launched Primal Trust as level 2, which is when I realized that people were trying to heal their nervous system, but their whole life was about healing their nervous system rather than living their values. They'd forgotten who they were.
Hmm.
Especially when you get sick, your identity becomes about sickness. So
Hmm.
level 2 is about remembering who you are or reinventing who you are, and learning how to weave nervous system tools and parts work and inner attachment repair into this journey of self-discovery, of living your values, so that the journey is no longer about healing Lyme or mold or whatever. It's about reclaiming yourself and finding what you love and using the tools to help increase your capacity for that. So your identity, your purpose, the whole thing starts to shift. And that's where the rubber meets the road, because it's not about, you're not thinking of yourself as being sick all day anymore. You're like, what do I want? What's keeping me in the way? What do I love? How do I live today? Where did I lose myself? The questions that really matter, not what pill should I take? What food should I eat? All that. And so it's a shift in focus. And then level 3 is more of like, the deeper stuff, our relationship stuff, our getting back to work, really challenging each other to take that radical responsibility of like, it's time to become self-empowered and to be that true, that sovereign being that we are. And it's more just a group where we're going for our best self, and we're doing the deep work of learning how to forgive our partners and things like that. Yeah.
Well, so that the way you're describing it, it sounds pretty pretty relational. It sounds like that there's a lot of that one sounds like it's pretty community oriented. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, because eventually once we get beyond our own issues, we realize we have this whole life that we need to heal and work with our partners, our kids, our parents, and we support each other in that that sometimes difficult journey of doing that.
Super cool. Well, maybe as a closing theme, I guess I'm curious where what's next. Where's Primal Trust headed? The way I understand is it has not been around for a long time, but it's just been this big, fastly accelerating snowball. I'm just curious kind of where that's going and where's it taking you?
I have no idea, but what I do want to do is I really want to be able to send people who've learned these tools to different parts of the world to teach people who need them, because this nervous system work is only going to be needed more and more and more. And there's not everybody can afford this or get online or whatever. So, my bigger hope is that we have kind of like nervous system mission work where I have so many graduates that I hopefully can afford to send all over the place to places that need to understand how to breathe and how to brain retrain and how to get into your body. So that's ultimately what I'm hoping this is all for eventually.
Wonderful. Awesome. Was there anything that we should have touched on that we didn't?
Gosh, I think I just want to give people hope if they're struggling and they have never been down this path of brain retraining and nervous system work. It is such powerful work. I don't want you to get you canceled, but I think it's more powerful than, medication we can be taking for our body. At least it was for me. I was somebody who had severe panic disorder for like 20 years and nothing. I mean, I was on medication, brain retraining and somatics. Like, we can change that. Doesn't mean you don't feel anxiety or you don't get stressed, but you learn that you can handle it. And same thing with our illnesses. Like, I'm still human. I still get sick from time to time. I still have stuff happen, but I have tools that help to pull me out of cell danger response so my body can complete the process. And it's really the tools we need to handle being a human in this planet at this changing time of all sorts of stressors.
Right.
And so, whether it's my program or Google and you learn something on Google, make it a priority to address your nervous system and keep that as healthy as possible.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Well, let's leave it there. Of course, we'll have, goes without saying, but about all the information to connect with Primal Trust and the program, all of that will be included in the show notes to plug in and check it out for yourselves. But Kathleen, thank you so much. This was wonderful to capture.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Redbeard Embodiment Podcast. To learn more, visit us at redbeardsomatictherapy.com or send me an email at alex@redbeardsomatictherapy.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, help spread the word by subscribing and sharing with others. Hope to see you next time.